Today we're going to have a reading on competition. I can investigate how organisms and populations may compete for abiotic and biotic factors. Starter. The couch spade lives in Texas. Which resource is most likely scarce in this environment? Their pupils are vertical slits. Adults have molten brown backs and light colored bellies. Their eggs and tadpoles develop quickly in temporary ponds that form after the rain. Adults live in holes they dig using special spades on their feet. Adults eat insects and spiders. So, which resource is most likely scarce in this environment with this information of the couch spade? Scarce means not much of. So, is there not much soil, sunlight, water, or oxygen? So here it's telling you that the couch spade lays their eggs and tadpoles develop quickly in temporary ponds that form after the rain. So we understand that the ponds are temporary, that they only form after the rain. So we can infer that water is scarce. Okay, there's a limited amount of water, so they have to lay their eggs fast. What are some abiotic factors that plants depend on or may compete for? Your teak reads, you guys will be investigating how organisms and populations in an ecosystem depend on and may compete for biotic and abiotic factors. Abiotic factors such as quantity of light, water, range of temperature, or soil. So plants can compete for these abiotic factors such as quantity of light, the amount of light, water, temperature, and soil. Today we're going to have an article on competition. But before we do that, I want you to circle whether you agree or disagree with these statements before the reading. And then we'll come back to this guide and then circle, do we still agree or disagree with these statements after we read the article? So read the statements in the anticipation guide below. In the before reading column, drag and drop the red circles if A, you agree, or D, you disagree. So the first statement says, competition occurs in virtually every ecosystem. Agree or disagree? Animals of different species typically compete with each other for food, water, and shelter. Agree or disagree? When plants compete for biotic and abiotic factors, this can shape their entire ecosystem, how it looks. Agree or disagree? And lastly, plant competition can impact the life cycles of some plants. Okay, let's have a look at this article and read it together. So I'm just going to read the article to you guys. Competitive relationships in ecosystems. A competitive relationship in a biological community includes the plant and animal species within the ecosystem that compete for food, territories, and mating with the opposite sex. Competition occurs in virtually every ecosystem in nature. This relationship develops when more than one organism in the environment has the same need or resource as the other to survive. Competition often results in the survival of the fittest. So when the same species compete. Rivalry often occurs between members of the same species within the ecological community, known as intra-specific competition, the most common of the competitive relationships. Animals of the same species often live together in the same community. These individuals compete for limited resources like food, shelter, mates. Intraspecific competition helps nature keep the population under control. When food is limited, the environment can only feed so many individuals of the same species. This results in the survival of the fittest. Only those capable of winning against their counterparts survive. Similar regulation occurs when individuals compete over shelter for raising young. This often occurs with young male lions. Animals that lose are driven from the group and from the area. Well, what about when different species compete? Intra-specific competition occurs when members of more than one species compete for the same resources. Woodpeckers, squirrels often compete for nesting rights, and some holes and spaces in trees, while lions and cheetahs of the African savanna compete for the same antelope or gazelle prey. Even though individual animals are competing for the same shelter or food, interspecific competition is usually less critical than intraspecific competition. The antelope, for example, is not the lion's only prey. Because of this, the lion can choose to compete for antelope or to look elsewhere. Animals of different species typically compete with each other only for food, water, and shelter, but they often compete with members of their own species for mates and territory as well. Plant competition. Plants also compete for space, nutrients, and resources such as water and sunlight. This competition can shape how the ecosystem looks. Taller trees shield a forest's understory, the ground beneath the forest's treetop canopy, from sunlight, making it hard for anything to grow but the most shade tolerant plants. The life cycles of some plants are also impacted because many shorter plants flower and bear seeds before the leaves of the taller trees are fully developed, which makes it possible for shorter plants to receive sunlight. Desert plants have developed shallow, far reaching root systems to successfully compete for valuable water resources, which is an example of how competition can affect the evolution of a species. Evolution specification. Scientists posit that competitive relationships may at least be particularly responsible for the evolutionary process. In natural selection, the individuals of a species best adapted to the environment around them survive to reproduce and pass on the genetics that make them well adapted. Take the giraffe, for example, whose evolution of its long neck makes it possible to eat foods with little no competition. As an herbivore, as an herbivore, it competes with other grazing herbivores such as zebras and antelope for food. Giraffes with longer necks are able to reach the leaves of high tree branches, giving them access to more food and better chance of passing their genetics onto their offspring. Okay, now that we read that article, I would like that you reread the statements. And now, do you agree or disagree with those statements? And I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay. Okay, and in summary, you can type to me and tell me, I used to think, and tell me what you used to think about competition. Then write to me and tell me what you discovered. I discovered. And then lastly, now I know, and type to me there. Hey, for your exit question today, it's a star test question on competition. It reads, the graph below shows the percent of seeds from two plant species that sprout when grown in water containing different amounts of salt. Summarize the effect of salt water on these plant species. So here we have species one, and here you have species two. So when you look at your x-axis, it says salinity of water. That means how much salt is in the water. You can see the salinity of the water is increasing. And then seeds that sprout. So here we have the seeds, okay, two different species of seeds. So here you can see that the plant is sprouting, but then when it reaches this salinity, it starts to decrease and can't survive. However, you see that species two, as the salinity of the water increases, it can still sprout. Okay, and then it starts to not sprout after a certain amount of salinity. So you're going to type to me about this graph below. Okay, I hope you enjoyed your lesson on competition.